Well, happy Friday. Welcome to Staff Stories. My name is Sarah. I get to be the Associate Director of Young Adult Ministries here at Calvary Community Church, Westlake. And today we have with us Trish Caruth, who is our Community Outreach Director. And Trish, I'm so excited to have you here. So thank you so much for being with us.
It's always fun to sit and to spend time with you, Sarah. So I'm super glad to be here.
Oh, I'm glad. I know. It's nice to be in person with people. I'm really grateful for this.
It's so good. I don't know that we've crossed each other's paths in the hallway for months.
I really don't. Yes, I'm hardly ever in the office. I come on Thursdays for young adults, and that's pretty much it. So it's kind of a treat to be back and get to sit across from you. So thank you.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here with you.
Yeah. So we're just going to jump into some questions, covering your experience during these kind of crazy 2020, I think, as a blanket statement.
Yeah.
But the first one we'll break it down, but really simply, if you can describe your experience during quarantine in 3 words, like what comes to mind? What would they be?
Well, first off, I got to cheat just a little bit because Sarah sent the questions to me. And this one was actually really tough for me because at first I wanted just to say weary. And when I was prepping, I think I told you before we started speaking, I would become sort of overwhelmed with emotions. And so I really thought about it. And the 3 words that I've come up with, the first one being weary, the second one being joy. And I'll tell you a little more about that in a minute. And the third one is on sovereignty. I have really begun to see how the Lord is sovereign over everything.
Yeah.
And that I can trust him.
Yeah.
Even in the midst of this crazy time that it's unprecedented. We've never lived in before.
Yeah.
So he is trustworthy. He is sovereign.
Yes.
And we can have great faith in him.
That's good. That's good. And I like that you kind of started by unpacking sovereignty, because I think that is in that series of events. I feel like I've felt at least the first 2, but how do you feel like those connect, or like kind of working backwards through them? How would you kind of unpack some of those?
Yeah. And I feel very fortunate. I've walked with the Lord going on about 50 years.
God, that's amazing. Yes. I feel like saying
I'm not going to tell you when I came to Jesus because that'll give away my age, and we're not supposed to tell But I realized that at this time, I am calling on a lot of my experiences with Jesus. I have seen him do miracles. I have seen him meet me in really dark places before, so I know that he's trustworthy.
Come on,
And I know that even in this situation, he's in control. Yes. He knows this is not surprising him, and I think he wants to use these kind of difficulties for his glory.
Yeah.
And so I'm lucky. I have this long history of knowing I can trust him. But my trust is still being challenged sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But I think about the person who maybe hasn't walked with Jesus for a long time and how much harder that would be to not go through it knowing that you have this solid rock that you can stand on.
Right.
So his sovereignty means so much to me at this time.
Yeah.
All afresh and new.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always these new opportunities to kind of unveil the dynamic character of God truly. And I think it's interesting what you said about history, because I find myself continually saying, I know I've been through something like this.
Yes.
But there's always these fresh opportunities the Lord wants to reveal himself to us. So in a way it's a gift, but it can feel like a trial.
Well, it is a trial when we walk through it.
Yeah.
I'm reminded that Jesus, his scars were very painful.
Yes.
And yet to us, those scars are a beauty to us to behold, because it's because of his pain and suffering that we know that we are loved by the God of the universe. We know without a shadow of a doubt that God is with us in the midst of the storm.
Right.
And kind of like when Peter was standing on the water and doing this miraculous thing.
Yeah, the boat Peter, and he's like, great, for like 2 seconds. Then we're like, oh my gosh.
That's right.
I'm on water.
Right.
In the middle of the storm.
And then he starts to sink because he starts to see the waves. We can find ourselves at this time looking at the waves.
Totally. Yeah.
And so it's that fixing our eyes on Jesus.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I guess like from that, how would you say like you've been able to identify, like you said, joy, or transition into a place of joy?
Oh my gosh. I have loved some of the things that have gone on during COVID, during this whole movement of unrest in our country. My daughter got married to the love of her life, a
Congrats.
COVID Zoom wedding.
Yes.
Just the family involved. My husband married them.
Really? Oh, that's
Talk
so cool.
about joy.
Yes.
And they are so happy and full. We got to do their counseling over Zoom.
Oh, that's amazing.
So their pre-marriage counseling.
Yes.
So that was so joy-filled. I have a grandson named Will, who, if he had been born, hi Will, yeah. He's 1 year old now.
Oh, man.
But I've had to get to know him through Zoom.
It's been half his life almost.
It has been. I've gotten to see him a couple times, and I was there when he was born, but most of it has been over technology. And to be far away from your kids and to have technology, that is a miracle. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And he knows me.
Yeah.
So I love that I can play peekaboo with him. I can put my finger over over the lens.
The stage where you're still developmentally, like they actually disappeared. Like yes. I try to think of that as an adult. Like what would that actually be like?
But now when the screen goes kind of reddish because of my thumb over it, he goes, oh, where is she? And you can just see his face brighten up. It's so cute. And then I want to say the other joyful thing is, I'm the outreach director, so yes. I get to see people who come to us hurting, but I get to see God moving in amazing ways. Just a few weeks ago, someone donated Pocketbook of Promise books.
Okay.
And I was so excited, and then they got stuck in my trunk, and I forgot about them for a couple weeks. But God, in his sovereignty, he knows the time we need to pull those out.
Absolutely.
So he reminded me last week, and I promptly forgot. People who know me know I react in the moment. And last week he was like, don't forget. And I put him in a bag, and I carried him around with me, and I said, tap me, Lord. Tell me if there's someone who needs a promise. And I gave away quite a few of them, and I've had some awesome responses, but I want to share one story because it's joy-filled.
Yes.
A gal that came through the line, her name was Michelle. She's looking at back surgery. And as she started to share with me her struggle, she's like, I am going in, and the recovery is long and hard, and no one can be with me.
Wow.
And God said, I got this. I pulled out the pocketbook of promises, and I opened up the part to when you feel alone, when you're afraid, when you're frustrated. Wow. And I said, these are promises. She starts crying. Wow. I start crying. It was just such a moment of God saying, I saved these books for this moment because I wanted to tell Michelle I love her and I am with her. So the fact that I hadn't given those books away several weeks ago, he knew Michelle. He knows her name. You know, he sees her. And she found such hope in that gift. Yeah. And then the next week, which was this week, I was walking through the line and somebody was reading, and I'm like, oh, you got your book. And she's like, oh, I have been reading it cover to cover. God knows that we need these encouragements, and he knows who needed it, who wanted it. And I get to see that. I mean, that's miraculous to me.
The intentionality of that. And I used to have a pastor who would say that encouragement is the oxygen of the church. And I really believe it's true. As people, we need it.
Wait, say that again.
Encouragement is the oxygen of the church. And his promises are encouragement to our souls. We need that continual renewal of hope in him, not from any other source. But it's that, I love that. And like you said, you're going through this line, but more specifically, is this Fresh Market the ministry?
Fresh Market.
Awesome.
But we see it in the other ministries as well, and that's part of the joy. There are people behind the scenes making masks, and they handwrite these little notes that tell people who get the masks that God loves them. I mean, that is a saint. There's a gentleman who goes, he calls me every once in a while. He and his son collect bottles. I mean, these are the saints that nobody sees, but I have this awesome position where I get to see people living and loving like Jesus behind the scenes that nobody else knows, but their mansions are going to be awesome when they get there.
You'll know where they are.
I wanted to piggyback on something you said. And the thought was, someone once said that, miracles, they're just coincidences. And I'm reminded that when we walk in faith, we see a lot of coincidences because God is doing miracles. You can call it a coincidence or you can call it a miracle, but I know that God loves people and he's doing things on their behalf.
Yes, and to celebrate those things. And it's part of our testimony to call out the things of God when heaven touches earth and when those things come and speak, in our lives and lives of people we love. But
I love that, when heaven touches earth. I'm going to go home filled up after spending time with you.
Me too. I mean, I have like tonight or yesterday, technically. But I'm just excited to go into ministry. And we need this. I think this whole time of talking to staff we were excited about because we know that there's so much that goes on beyond this building and beyond even just the ministry you get to do in the lanes that you're used to running in, because COVID has disrupted and created opportunities for us to go and see God in so many other spaces, and even getting to do this online is such a blessing. And we just hope to hear more of those things because we need that as the believers, and we want to be connected to what God is doing on the earth. So thank you for sharing those specific testimonies. That's beautiful. Cool. Yeah.
I'm just going to segue to that, brings us to the last one, which is weary.
Yes.
Because I feel like sometimes I sit in a unique position in that I see a lot of people because they originally come to outreach ministries because they have tremendous needs.
Right.
And as much as I want to help everyone, their stories are so difficult, and we are not able to rescue like Jesus can rescue.
Yeah.
And I think that's the word that came up to me the most, is that this is such a weary time, and I too feel that weariness. There are there's a sweet woman that I know and would call her in a way a friend. I know her well enough, and she's a single mom. She lost her job. Well, first she was furloughed, didn't know how she was going to make it, and then when it continued, they ended up laying her off. She's a single mom, 2 boys, no job, rent is due, doesn't have support systems in place. I mean, we've plugged her into some resources, but it is hard. She doesn't know what's going to happen in the future, and I want to help as much as I can, and we have resources, but the truth is we don't know. And that makes me weary, because I can where I can't fix it, I can just pray. And sometimes it doesn't, I mean, I know it's enough, but it's a battle for me sometimes, and that's just one. We pray over all the prayer requests. And I as I pray through those prayer requests, everything is harder than it used to be. The person who's getting cancer treatment, maybe they go in and they are alone at home as they go through that. They don't have their support system. Or like Michelle, the gal I was talking to, she's going to the hospital and looking at a long time of rehab with no one next to her. She doesn't know how she's going to make it through that. It's compounded. The family that had struggles before COVID, now they have COVID on top of that, and those struggles are exacerbated, and maybe they don't have a faith in Jesus, but maybe even if they do, they're struggling and wondering, where is God in all of this? Why would he allow me to not be able to pay my bills, and what's going to happen to my kids? What if we end up homeless? I mean, those are real things that I see, and I carry them. And I have to keep, I think of cast all your cares upon him. He cares for you. I have to keep turning it back to the Lord, because I can't fix everything. And I want to, but I can't. And I know the beauty of walking through painful things like Jesus did. Because of the scars. The weariness is probably the biggest at the forefront for me of what COVID has done. It's just sort of created a weariness.
And I think thank you for sharing that, because I think that's entirely relatable. And I think sometimes we, especially in this time, hearing people's stories we walk through, sometimes not even being able to name this like anxiety or extra, like almost like invisible layer that we're feeling, but it is, I think the word you use, compounding, is so real.
we have 2 young adults that were living with us during COVID, which was also huge joy because we got to do it all together and have great fun.
Yes.
But even they were saying, and one of them was particularly telling me the other day, she said, just the normal stuff that I normally deal with and can manage. Now, because of COVID, I find myself getting short with people, or I find myself struggling more and not having patience.
Yeah.
And it's this underlying current that COVID is out there. I don't know if I'm going to have my job in a few weeks or not.
Right.
There's just that extra burden that we have to keep giving back to Jesus.
Yes, the dependency. We're just so aware of it.
So hard.
Yes. Yeah. I was listening, one of my favorite authors and speakers is Brene Brown, and she talks about...
I love her.
Oh, she's amazing.
Yes. Empathy.
Yes, empathy, vulnerability.
Yes, vulnerability.
Shame.
Yes.
But she just talks about being able to call those things out in moments like that, and also having this depth of understanding that the illusion of control, and how when we're in busyness or when we're in routine, or kind of for those of you who can remember pre-2020 quarantine mode, we go and we have this illusion of all these things in our life that we're in control of, when really, especially understanding the sovereignty of God, like you said, we're not, when those things get disrupted.
It's both the hardest thing is that we're not in control.
Right.
And then it's the one thing we have to do is give God control.
Right.
And,
it's a refining process that is not fun, but it's almost this deep soul, detoxification, where at the end of it, it might not feel good in the process, but the result is so worth it. And it's just encouraging to even be able to say this is hard, but we're going to keep going. And I'm with it in you, with you, with the women in your life and with your family. I think that's beautiful. I love that. And I feel like you've touched a little bit on the next couple questions, but I just want to give you room in case you wanted to add anything. But as far as personal growth goes during this time, do you feel there's one a salient point you would say this has been my biggest point of personal growth in quarantine?
I'm glad that you asked that question, because I had a pretty profound moment of growth, and it was during the whole when the Black Lives Matter movement began, and I remember I feel like I don't always have that much bias. But then we were being challenged to examine our bias, which I was beginning to do. And it was really interesting. I had this moment with God. I pulled up to a corner where they were protesting and having their signs and all that. And I was about ready to honk my horn in support and be oh. And then I saw a bunch of superlatives, I'm just going to tell you, on the signs. And I thought, no, I'm not going to honk right now, because I don't like the way that's being done. And I went through, and I was driving, and God came and met me in that moment. And he just basically said to me, so you are not going to listen because someone isn't speaking in the voice that you would speak in.
Wow. Trish, I just got goosebumps. That's huge.
It's huge. And it made my bias slap me. God does this sometimes. He just hits us over the head with bam.
Oh yeah, it becomes glaringly obvious that you're that's
so biased.
Yes. I've had very similar moments.
So my daughter, who's very, I would say, pretty involved in the moment, she's sending me different materials to read and stuff. And so I started to read that, and I realized I need to be willing to listen to voices other than voices that communicate the way I do. Yes. So if that foul language is part of their vernacular and that's the way they communicate, I need to be willing to listen and hear the heart and the hurt behind it.
Yes.
Jesus hears us. He doesn't care if we cuss and swear and say, I don't like this.
Someone's got to hear that.
Because he does care, because he says, no, let no unwholesome word come out of your mouth. But that's when we're believers.
But he comes for our hearts, and he comes to understand past even.
Well, and he calls us to this ministry of reconciliation.
Absolutely.
In 1 Corinthians, he says, we are called to be ambassadors for Jesus.
Yes.
Not counting people's sins against them, but like Jesus, begging them to be reconciled to God, pointing them to Jesus.
Yes.
But if I'm not willing to enter into the conversation because they don't speak my language, that's a sin in my life. And so I think that's been a journey he and I have been on since that moment, is really learning to listen and to go, Lord, keep the bias out and help me to hear what they're saying. Help me to enter into their hurts and listen and not be deterred because they are speaking a different way than I would speak. So, and I think that's where it starts. We're in such a divisive place in our country. We have to start listening to the other voice.
Absolutely.
And hearing them.
Yes.
And making sure that they know that they're heard.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Because Jesus hears them.
Absolutely. And nothing gets accomplished by speaking into a vacuum, and we grow into the heart of God when we're able to go into places of that to us are a discomfort, or even marginalized places that we're like, I'm not going to be comfortable there. I'm not sure what to say or do, but to go anyways, because we follow Christ into those spaces, especially when we know he's leading. I love what you said of like that moment that God met you, and then he takes that and he leads you back, says, okay, I'm going to do this with you because it matters. So
it does
I
matter.
love that.
Yeah. I'm so grateful that he does that in my life. He shows me my sins. I hate it, but I love it at the same time.
Yes.
He's refining us.
Yes. It's
making us
have more honest relationships with ourselves and with the Lord, and only help can come from that. Well, thank you for sharing that. I guess kind of like on the flip side of that personal moment of growth, you spoke a little bit to the challenge of weariness, but do you feel like there has been any other challenges or disappointments during quarantine that have kind of come to the forefront?
Well, that it's great because it's really a twofold thing. The listening to other people and growing in this area of empathy toward others. But the second part is not listening to that voice of hopelessness. And I do find myself there sometimes where I think, what are we doing? And can we meet more needs? What comes to my mind is a scene right now in Schindler's List, where at the end of his life, he says, oh my gosh, I could have done this. And did I not do it? And I wrestle with that sometimes. Is there more that we could do? And should I do this? Should I step into this or should I not? And I think sometimes, I'm in a holy tension. I have to just ask Jesus, do you want me to do this or do you not? When am I loving and withholding something? And when do I love and do something? And it's not always, an easy answer. And so I need to know that Jesus is in it with me in that moment. Because I can't bear the burden of my decisions. And it hurts somebody. But
absolutely.
So
and I can know you and I see your heart. I can just see like how much the Lord has like woven in his own heart for people. And I think it's that trust that he wants to minister and take care of you as you're ministering to others. And back to that sovereignty piece of like, okay.
And
Lord,
I can't lose hope. I can't lose hope for the people that are seeking hope. Sorry, I brought my Kleenex in case this happens because
you're
talking about weariness. And I'm not much of a, I say that I don't feel like I'm a crier, but sometimes I guess I am.
I think it's beautiful and appropriate, and thank you for bearing your emotions, because I think if we're all honest, we felt that. And I think it's even just to have empathy and be outward looking and understand that like whether we're looking at our own state of hope or wanting to hope for others, that is something that we need the Lord to contest for with us. That we can't generate that on our own. And to become...
I was going to say that Isaiah, I think it's Isaiah, it says, do you not know? Have you not heard? That the Lord our God does not grow weary. He is never tired. And that for those who look to him, he will refresh us and he'll give us rest. And I love that in Isaiah, and it ends with they that wait on the Lord will mount up with the wings like eagles. So if you are feeling weary, if you are feeling hopeless, and I have those moments too, just know that the God of all hope is with you and he sees you and he's in the midst of that. Go to the Psalms and read the Psalms where David cries out to God because God always meets him and he ends up saying, okay, you're in control, Lord Jesus, I'm not. So
amen. And we're invited to continually do that. I think that's the beauty of reading through scriptures.
Oh my gosh.
Wow, look at all these humans that are, like us, heroes of the faith who have to continue to go before God and say, renew my strength, because the Lord is able to do that.
Yeah. And I think the other thing that I see oftentimes in people is they think, well, I'm not good enough yet. I'm not like you. I'm not there. And God gave me this illustration years ago as I was studying sin about the arrow. You know, if you don't know this, sin is also an archery word, that if you have a target and you draw your arrow back and you miss the mark, that is the sin. And I was, one time I was preparing to share, and I was asking the Lord to give me a new idea to share the gospel, or a way to share the gospel. And I had been studying that, and I had this beautiful picture of how Jesus, so here's my target, and I draw my bow back and it shoots forward and I miss the mark. You know, that's my sin. Well, Jesus, what he did was he came and he stands. The minute I believe in him, he stands in front of my target, and he takes the arrows that were missing the mark there, and he takes them and he puts them in himself. And then every time as I go out my life, I'm trying to point my arrows toward the mark of Jesus as I study the word, but I still miss the mark. But he stays in front of that target, and he takes the pain of my sin. He absorbs that, and that's what he did on the cross. Is he absorbed those sins, so you don't ever have to be good enough. He's already taken that, and now his righteousness, the clean target, my target looks like his target. It's without sin. My target is without sin. His righteousness is imparted to me. I can't remember where that passage is, but it talks directly about that he took him who knew no sin to become sin on my behalf. So this feeling of hopelessness and thinking you can't go to God without having a little bit of a better direction, or I'm starting to be good enough, that is so not what it's about. He's already paid the price. He just wants you to believe in him, and then your target becomes wiped clean because he takes all the pain of those sins upon himself.
That's a beautiful visual. Thank you for sharing. I'm a visual learner, so I am too. I'm like, these are all things I know conceptually. Like, I'm in seminary right now, and I'm still like, wow, if only someone could paint that picture, that'd be.
It's so powerful.
We need to simplify it.
So when I speak it, we're getting off track, but when I speak it, sometimes I'm like, so I pull my arrow back and I let go, and it goes, and it hits Jesus. And
Trish falls to the ground in the middle of a fresh market. You're like, what is she doing?
And then he takes it. Because he deals with it, and it leaves a scar on him, not on my plate of righteousness, my target. Mine is wiped completely clean. His righteousness. It's just powerful. But
absolutely. I just want to shoot our truth. You know?
We're good.
Let's steam off.
Trust in Jesus. He's taken your sin. Come to him, and he will give you hope.
That's love
the
it.
Message.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, perfect segue into one of our last questions is, what else do you feel like you've learned about the Lord during this time?
So that's a great question too. At the beginning of COVID, I watched actually with, I think, one of the roommates and that was living with us, the Mr. Rogers movie.
Oh my gosh, yes.
I loved that. And there is this powerful scene in it where he takes a notebook and he's kneeling by his bed. And I loved this moment because he begins to read the names. And he'll just say, Joseph, Mary, Michelle, Trish, Mr. Rogers, and he's praying, but all he's doing is saying the name. And I think, for me, it was a really sweet moment. I have a beautiful garden. I filmed from my garden.
Yes.
And God has been meeting me in the garden so many times. And there are times where I go out and stand and I'll think, okay, I'm going to think about Fresh Market volunteers.
Yeah.
And I'll just begin to say their names. And God knows them. He knows their stories.
Yeah.
He knows how to meet their needs. And I just lift their names before the Lord. Or I'll pick my family, or I'll pick the guests that come to see us at the food pantry, or just friends. I'll just begin, and that's it seems like it's less prayer, if you will, because I'm not agonizing over the specifics of their requests, but God knows them.
But I was going to say, you know who you're praying to. And that's something I've been learning. In one of my devotionals, just reflecting on the fact that it's not always the weight of like those words, but it's the weight of who you're bringing them before. And I think
we have a great high priest who's interceding on our behalf. So when I lift those names up, he knows. And I feel like my work in prayer is richer.
Yes.
Even though it's less, if you will, it's just as fervent, but it's fervent in a different way.
Absolutely. Yes.
Even I was struck after Tuesday Fresh Market because they were stringing lights, and it was the first time I realized our olive trees there make this beautiful little garden.
Yes. Yeah.
And I stood out there. It was after Fresh Market. Fresh Market can it's wonderful. It's so joy-filled, and yet it's weary as well.
Totally. It's a long morning, yeah.
And I remember thinking, I lifted up some names because I thought, Lord, Jesus prayed in an olive garden.
Yes.
We have out in front of Calvary our own little olive garden.
There it is.
I know.
I forget.
Yeah.
Should check it out once you come back.
I had that sweet moment of just being with Jesus and lifting up names in the olive garden of Calvary.
So, I feel like this feels so right on so many levels.
Yeah. So that's a new thing for me since COVID. That's been a really sweet. And I'm so thankful he gave it to me early on in COVID because the burdens are so great.
Yeah.
And there's so many hurting people.
Yeah.
So it's sweet to be able to just say their names and know he knows, and he knows the answers.
Yeah.
He knows how to meet them right where they are, right as they are. They don't need to change anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very sweet. So.
Yeah, it improves our view of God and our trust in those burdens. And I love that.
It's just so big.
Yeah.
It's so big.
I'm going to try that. I'm going to try that simplicity. I love it.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
So we've arrived at our final question, and I think this is a particularly fun one. But really, coming out of this, we know the season isn't necessarily over, but it sounds like you've learned a lot. There's a lot of new rhythm and habits you've been getting into. What would you say is one habit, rhythm, or experience that you would want to continue beyond this COVID season, or really beyond 2020?
Well, I'm going to give this one directly to Curtis. Curtis is our boss. I love being able to work from home some. So
if you're listening.
Yeah, if you're listening.
Ditto.
There is
some.
Yeah, well, I like being here, and there's a richness to seeing people.
Yes.
But there is a richness to having a little bit of margin. I think Calvary staff, if you don't know, or if you wonder what we do all day, there is everyone on the staff works so incredibly hard. I have never met a team of people that are on all the time. And it's quite, with the work-life balance things, I think we all struggle because the needs are so great. Totally. And it's ministry. It's not really work.
Yeah.
So being able to do some of it from home allows me to, on Saturday morning, now I don't have to necessarily get up and do all my laundry, which takes several hours if I wait till just Saturday. Yeah. I can go put a load in between answering emails.
Right.
Or like my husband is working from home, and if I'm gone all week, which some weeks I am, I can be home with him sometimes when I work from home, and we can take a break and go for a walk around the block. There's a sweetness there that has brought a better work-life balance for me when I'm able to do it. And so that's one of the things I hope will continue. And the other thing that I love is Zoom and social media. I still have a long way to learn.
Hey, but we got time to improve.
I am enjoying beginning to learn how to do that, to meet people. I do a prayer group that we do on Fridays with a friend, and we have people from all across the country.
That's cool.
I'm meeting new people who are joining us to pray, and it's just really sweet.
Yeah.
So I like Zoom.
The whole
and social media and all these things are sort of new for me.
I think sometimes we have to be reminded of the merits of Zoom, because I know people feel a little zoomed out, but it's so true to really appreciate the opportunity we have in this season, and I love that. And I'm with you on the work from home, so may be noted, but
Curtis,
thank you. Thank you so much just for getting together and sharing those things and encouraging me and
ditto, you've encouraged me
and encouraging our body and just our Calvary family and those
We're
of you.
So blessed, aren't we?
We really are, honestly. And we hope to continue to connect with you guys through these segments. So thank you for listening to our staff stories, and we'll see you next Friday.
And keep living and loving like Jesus.
Amen. Amen. Thank you, Trish.
You're welcome.